A shy café waitress shocks everyone when she fluently greets the ruthless Alpha King's deaf mother in sign language, instantly earning the queen's favor. What starts as a simple act of kindness turns into a powerful bond that challenges the king's pride, his pack's traditions, and the fate written for them both. Rain tapped softly against the cafe windows as if it, too, were afraid to make too much noise. The late afternoon rush had faded, and the warm air smelled of coffee, sugar, and the faint citrus of freshly mopped floors. Behind the counter, a shy young waitress named Lina adjusted her black apron with trembling fingers, trying to steady her breathing. She told herself it was just another shift, just another quiet day in the corner cafe where nothing truly extraordinary ever happened. Then the door opened, and the world she knew stepped aside to make room for something else. Cold air swept in first, curling around the legs of the wooden chairs. Conversations stuttered and fell silent. Every head turned toward the entrance as a man walked in, broad-shouldered, taller than anyone in the room, draped in a heavy fur-lined cloak that did not belong to this small, modern town. His armor, dark and intricately carved, caught the dim light above the pastry case, reflecting it in sharp metallic glints. On his chest, a silver wolf's head snarled in eternal mid-growl, eyes crafted from stone that almost seemed to glow. Whispers fluttered from table to table, not quite words, just the sound of unease. He carried no visible weapon, but there was something about him that made people pull their hands closer to their cups, straighten their backs, lower their voices. His presence pressed against the air like a storm about to break. Lina had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. The Alpha King from the old kingdoms beyond the mountains, ruler of the hidden wolf clans, protector and tyrant depending on who you asked. They said he was ruthless, a man who trusted no one, a king who carried a curse in his bloodline and anger in his bones. They said he came to human towns only when he wanted something badly. Now he stood in front of the pastry case, scanning the room with dark, unreadable eyes. His scent, cold wind, pine, and something wild, cut through the familiar smell of coffee. Lina's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She knew she should smile and ask him what he wanted, the way she did with every customer, but her voice felt like it had been left in the break room with her unfinished cup of tea. He was not alone. A woman stepped in behind him, smaller, wrapped in a simple gray shawl that looked soft and worn with age. Her hair, threaded with silver, was tied back in a low bun. Despite the king's intimidating presence, there was a gentle calm about her, like the quiet at dawn just before the birds begin to sing. She reached out, lightly touching his armored arm, and he turned his head slightly, looking at her with a softness that did not match the rest of him. Lina watched closely as the woman raised her hands. They moved gracefully through the air, fingers shaping meaning without a single sound. It took Lina only a second to recognize it. Sign language. The woman's signs were fluid, practiced, full of tiny details that spoke of years and years of silence and conversation. The Alpha King's jaw tightened as he watched his mother's hands. He nodded once, curt and controlled, then looked back around the cafe, as if searching for someone who could bridge the quiet world of his mother and the noisy world around them. Lina's chest tightened, a familiar ache waking up inside her. Memories flashed through her mind. Her little brother, eyes bright with mischief, hands flying as he signed jokes at the dinner table. Her mother patiently practicing signs in front of a bathroom mirror. Lina, years younger, determined to be his voice when the world refused to listen. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every gaze hiding behind coffee cups and half-eaten pastries. No one moved. No one spoke. The Alpha King's expression hardened further, that small window of softness vanishing under a mask of cold authority. If he asked for help and no one responded, what would a man like him do? Lina knew fear. She knew shyness. She also knew what it felt like when people pretended not to see someone who couldn't speak or hear the way they did. Her fingers twitched against her apron. The cafe manager, usually so chatty, stayed behind the espresso machine, pretending to polish a cup, eyes pointed down. A couple in the corner shot nervous looks at the door as if calculating how quickly they could leave. Lina realized with a slow, sinking understanding that no one was going to step forward. Her feet moved before her brain agreed. She walked out from behind the counter, legs unsteady, the world suddenly too loud and too quiet at once. The soft squeak of her shoes on the floor sounded enormous in her ears. The Alpha King's eyes locked onto her with a focus that felt like a weight across her shoulders. He was even more intimidating up close, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw partly covered by his dark beard, and eyes that looked like they had seen too much war and not enough peace. Lina almost stopped, almost mumbled an apology and ran back, but then she saw the woman beside him again, the king's mother. Those gentle eyes, searching uncertainly across the room, trying to read lips she couldn't hear, hands hanging in the air without a response. Lina took a small breath and forced herself to smile. She turned her body slightly toward the older woman and lifted her hands. "Welcome," she signed, her fingers trembling only a little. "My name is Lina. Can I help you with anything?" The woman's eyes widened, confusion flickering into hope so bright it was almost painful to look at. For a second, she didn't move. Then her face bloomed into a smile so warm that the entire room seemed to shift. Her hands flew up, her signs quick and excited. "You sign! You really sign! You are human from this town." Lina nodded, feeling her own smile grow more real with every passing second. "Yes, my little brother is deaf. I learned when I was young. I'm happy to help you." Behind them, someone dropped a spoon. It clattered loudly against a saucer, jolting the room further out of its tension. Several customers stared openly now, their discomfort replaced by curiosity, then something else, softness, perhaps, or shame. The café, once painfully silent, now buzzed with a quiet disbelief. Lina felt the Alpha King's gaze on her, heavy and searching. She dared a quick glance at him. His expression had changed. The rigid, cold authority was still there, but layered beneath it was something more complicated. Surprise, yes, but also a flicker of something like gratitude, or maybe it was suspicion, or maybe both at once. His eyes moved from her hands to her face and back again, as if trying to place her in a world that followed rules he did not expect. "You speak her language," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel under boots. It wasn't a question, more of an observation, but it carried an edge, as if he were testing the weight of this new reality. Lina nodded, not trusting her voice yet. She signed and spoke at the same time, her words meant for both of them. "Yes, I do. If you want, I can help you order. Or translate." The king's jaw clenched, and for an instant, pride flashed across his face like lightning. Lina saw it clearly. The struggle of a powerful man who was used to controlling every room he walked into, now forced to rely on a shy waitress in a small-town café to speak gently with the woman he loved most. Beside him, his mother touched his arm again, smiling up at him with eyes that said more than any words. Her hands moved slowly, tenderly, as she signed. "She is kind. Let her help." Lina watched as the Alpha King inhaled deeply, the leather straps of his armor creaking with the motion. The tension in his shoulders did not vanish, but it shifted, like a door unlocking slightly. He gave a short nod, the smallest possible surrender. "Very well," he said quietly. "Help us." Lina's heart fluttered with a strange mixture of fear and pride. The customers around them leaned in slightly, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Something invisible but important had just changed in the room, and everyone felt it without fully understanding why. She turned back to his mother. "What would you like to drink?" Lina signed. "We have tea, coffee, hot chocolate. The hot chocolate is very good today." The woman laughed silently, delight bubbling from her chest, and signed back enthusiastically. "Hot chocolate, with extra cream. It's my first time in a place like this." Lina giggled softly. "Then we'll make it special," she promised. As she translated the order for the king, their eyes met again. This time, the intensity felt different, not just threatening, but probing, curious. As if he were trying to decide whether she was a danger, an opportunity, or something far more inconvenient. A reminder that not all power came from strength and fear. A gust of wind rattled the cafe windows, and a low rumble of thunder rolled somewhere far off in the distance. The king's gaze flicked briefly to the glass, then to the door, as if checking for some unseen threat. Under the table nearest to Lina, a little boy whispered to his mother, "Is he a hero or a monster?" The words were soft, but in the heavy hush of the cafe, Lina overheard them clearly. So did the Alpha King. His eyes darkened, the faint hint of warmth vanishing once more, replaced by a shadow of old wounds. For a heartbeat, he looked less like a king and more like a man who had spent his entire life being judged by stories others told about him. Lina saw it, she felt it, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her chest ached for him. She almost said something, some small kindness to pull him back from whatever memory those words had awakened. But before she could, the cafe lights flickered sharply, once, twice, then steadied. A strange chill ran through the room, raising goosebumps along Lina's arms. The Alpha King's head snapped toward the back of the cafe, his nostrils flaring, his eyes narrowing as if he smelled something no one else did. His hand moved instinctively toward his side, where no weapon hung, and he stepped closer to his mother, shielding her with his body without a word. Lina stared at him, confusion prickling beneath her skin. The customers shifted nervously, glancing around. Nothing seemed out of place, just the hum of fridges, the soft clink of cups, but the air felt different, charged, waiting. The king's gaze settled back on Lina, hard and urgent now. "You," he said quietly, "stay close." She blinked. "Why, what's happening?" His answer came out low and curt, carrying the weight of someone who had survived more battles than anyone in that cafe could imagine. "Someone followed us," he said, "and they did not come here for coffee." The soft jazz playlist continued to drift from the speakers, absurdly calm against the sharp rise of fear in Lina's chest. She glanced at the door, then at the king's mother, who watched her son's face with silent worry, fingers curling together as if searching for a prayer. Lina swallowed, her world of cups and menus suddenly colliding with a world of hidden kingdoms and unseen enemies. Her hands itched with the urge to keep signing, to keep communicating, to keep everyone calm. But another part of her, a part she didn't know existed until this moment, stirred with something fierce and unfamiliar. For the first time in her life, she stood at the edge of something dangerous, something bigger than her, bigger than the cafe, bigger than her town. And all she had between herself and whatever was coming was her shaking courage and the trust of an Alpha King with a storm in his eyes. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, drumming against the glass, as the cafe door handles slowly, almost silently, began to turn. The first crack in the armor. Rain hammered the windows now, turning the glass into a trembling curtain of silver. Every eye in the cafe was fixed on the door as the handle twisted, then paused, as if whoever was outside was listening, waiting for the right moment to step in. Lina's breath caught in her throat. She stood halfway between the counter and the king's mother, suddenly aware of how small she felt compared to the towering figure at her side. The Alpha King shifted, just enough to place his body slightly in front of his mother and Lina. It wasn't dramatic, just a careful, instinctive move, but Lina felt it, like a shield sliding into place. His cloak brushed her arm, heavy and cold, and she could feel the tension coiled inside him, like a wolf ready to spring. The door opened with a soft chime. A man walked in wearing a dark raincoat, hood pulled low. Water dripped from the edges, pattering onto the welcome mat. At first glance, he looked ordinary, a traveler, a stranger who'd gotten caught in the storm. But the Alpha King's eyes locked onto him instantly, sharpening with recognition and something like contempt. The newcomer smiled, too wide and too quick, like a mask being pinned in place. He pushed his hood back, revealing sharp features and pale, steady eyes that swept the room in a single practiced scan before landing on the king. "Impressive," he said lightly, voice smooth and almost friendly. "A hidden king in a human café. Times really have changed." Lina didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. It felt like the air between two storms colliding. The Alpha King did not return the smile. His voice was low, controlled. "You shouldn't have come here, Darius." So he knew this man. Lina's stomach twisted. Behind the king, his mother tugged lightly at his cloak. Her fingers began moving in quick, sharp signs. Lina's reaction was automatic. She watched, read, and understood. "Who is that? Is it the one who threatened your council? You said we were safe today." The king's jaw flexed. He didn't answer out loud. Lina's hands lifted on pure instinct, her heart pounding. "He knows him," Lina signed back to the Queen Mother, translating her own words softly under her breath. "His name is Darius. I don't know more yet, but he is not a friend." The older woman's eyes filled with worry, but she nodded, trusting Lina completely as if they'd known each other longer than 10 minutes. That trust landed heavy in Lina's chest. Darius took a slow step forward, hands lifted in a show of harmlessness that felt anything but harmless. "Relax," he said. "I only came to talk. No claws, no teeth. Not in front of the humans. I'm not heartless." The king's gaze didn't waver. "Your definition of heartless is flexible." A nervous laugh fluttered from someone in the back of the cafe. The manager peeked over the espresso machine, eyes wide. The little boy who'd asked if the king was a hero or monster gripped his mother's arm, unsure if this was a game or something far worse. Lina forced herself to step closer to the king's mother, placing a hand gently on the older woman's arm. The Queen Mother looked at her, and Lina signed, "Stay behind him. If anything happens, we'll move together." Her voice shook, but her hands were steady. Darius's attention slid lazily toward Lina, then to the Queen Mother, and his smile sharpened. "So this is what you've been hiding," he said to the king. "Bringing your mother out into the open world. Very bold, very risky." Something dangerous flickered in the Alpha King's eyes. "Leave her out of this." "In a public cafe," Darius chuckled. "I don't think that's possible anymore." Lina didn't understand their history, but she understood one thing clearly. Darius saw weaknesses, and he enjoyed pressing them. The way some kids in school had once laughed when her brother tried to speak aloud. The way certain customers pretended not to notice when she stuttered over words. That same smug cruelty was there, just dressed in older clothes. She swallowed, feeling anger rise up through her fear. The rain outside grew louder. The lights flickered again, once, casting the cafe into half shadow before buzzing back to life. Darius seemed amused. "I heard the rumors," he continued. "The mighty Alpha King seeking a cure for his curse, coming all the way down from his frozen throne, acting like a polite guest in a human town. I didn't believe it until now." A ripple of whispers flowed through the cafe. Curse, cure, king. The words brushed past Lina's ears like wind through leaves. She stared at the Alpha King's face, searching for a reaction he didn't want to show. His shoulders tensed, armor creaking softly. For a flicker of a moment, Lina saw it. Shame, old and heavy, buried beneath years of control. Her voice, when it came, surprised even her. Is he threatening you?" she asked quietly, looking up at the king. His eyes flicked down to her, startled. For a brief second, something like regret touched his gaze, as if he wished she hadn't gotten pulled into this. But it was too late. "He's threatening everyone," the king replied. "That's his nature." Darius sighed dramatically. Don't be so dramatic, cousin. Cousin. Lina's heart skipped. This wasn't just an enemy. This was family. Darius continued, voice turning silky. I came with an offer, actually. End the search. Stop chasing fairy tales about breaking the curse. Return to your throne, accept what we are, and I will. Let this little town remain untouched. A hush fell like a blanket over the room. Lina looked from one man to the other. Between them stood more than power. There was history, betrayal, and something darker she couldn't quite name. The Alpha King's mother watched her son with eyes full of dread, hands balled into tight fists that trembled against her shawl. Don't listen to him, she signed quickly, too fast for Lina to follow every word. You promised, you said you would find a way for them, for the children. The children. Lina caught enough of it to understand. This wasn't just about one man and his pride. It was about lives, futures, generations. The Alpha King inhaled slowly, deeply. His answer, when it came, was steady. No. The word was simple, but it echoed in the small café like a crack of thunder. Darius's smile finally faded. You'd choose a fantasy over your own people's safety. I'd choose hope, the king replied, voice low and firm, even if I have to stand alone with it. He didn't look alone to Lina. Not exactly, not anymore. Darius's eyes narrowed, the warmth draining from his face. For a heartbeat, menace flickered naked and sharp in his gaze. The room seemed to shrink. Then you've made your choice, Darius murmured. I won't touch these humans today. Consider it my last courtesy. But every step you take from now on, remember this place. Remember their faces. Remember that their safety hangs on a thread you are about to sever with your own stubborn hand. He turned toward the door, then paused and glanced back one last time, at Lina. You, he said softly, little waitress with quick fingers, be careful where you tie your fate. Kings fall, curses don't. The words slid under her skin like ice. Then he pulled up his hood and stepped back into the storm, the door closing behind him with a hollow thud. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of the rain filled the silence, relentless and wild. The cafe lights hummed. Distant thunder rolled. Inside Lina's chest, her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Slowly, conversations began to creep back, unsure and trembling. The manager cleared his throat and pretended to clean again. Someone laughed too loudly at nothing at all. The moment began to dissolve, but Lina knew nothing had gone back to normal. The Alpha King stood very still, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to burst open again. His mother touched his arm gently, signing, He won't stop, he never does. Lina hesitated, then stepped forward, her voice soft but certain. Your hot chocolate, she said quietly, is waiting, and I can listen, if you need someone who doesn't already have a story about you in their head. He turned to her slowly, surprised by her courage, or maybe by her kindness. His gaze searched her face for a long, heavy heartbeat. Why would you help me? He asked. Lina felt the eyes of the cafe on her again, but this time she didn't care. She thought of her brother, of being small and powerless but choosing, again and again, to show up anyway. Because, she said, meeting his stare, sometimes the only cure for a curse is someone willing to believe you're more than it. His expression shifted, just a fraction, but she saw it. A crack in the armor, a hint of wounded hope prowling behind his eyes like a caged animal. Behind the counter, the machine beeped, demanding attention. The hot chocolate waited, steam curling into the air like a fragile promise. The Alpha King's answer, when it finally came, was quiet enough that only she could hear. Then sit with us, he murmured, and let me tell you what I've done and what it might cost you to stay. The storm outside raged on, but inside, something else was just beginning. And Lina knew, with a sudden, dizzy clarity, that her life would never again fit inside 4 café walls. Stories told in steam and silence. The hot chocolate sat between them like a small, imperfect peace offering. Whipped cream melted slowly into the dark surface, forming soft, white islands that dissolved under the warmth. The Queen Mother cradled the mug in her hands, eyes soft with gratitude she couldn't voice, but didn't need to. The way she looked at Lina said enough. They had moved to a quiet corner table near the window, away from curious ears but not entirely out of sight. The café had settled into a strange calm, people pretending to return to their normal routines, but casting glances toward the armored stranger and the shy waitress who now sat opposite him as if this were just another friendly conversation. Lina's apron was slightly crooked. Her hands still shook when she reached for her own cup of tea, but something in her had settled too. Fear was still there, but it was wrapped now in something stronger, a need to understand. The Alpha King leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. His cloak pooled behind him like a dark river. Up close, Lina could see the tiny scratches on his armor, the faint, almost invisible scars at the edge of his jaw, the subtle tiredness around his eyes that no amount of strength could completely hide. His mother signed softly, her fingers moving with slow, deliberate care. "Tell her," she urged. "If you want her help, she needs to know." He watched her for a moment, then exhaled. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, the roughness still there but tempered with something gentler. "In the old kingdoms," he began, "strength is everything. We are born with more than human blood. We heal faster. We hear further. We shift when the moon is full and when anger calls us. For generations, my family ruled the wolf clans, keeping them hidden and controlled. That control came with a cost." Lina listened, eyes never leaving his face. The rain outside had softened to a steady, rhythmic patter, like a heartbeat on the glass. "The curse," she said softly, "is it about your power?" His jaw tightened. "It began as a blessing," he replied. "Centuries ago, one of my ancestors made a vow to protect the weakest of our kind, to never let the wildness turn on our own. The spirits answered. Our bloodline was given greater strength, greater speed, greater command over the shift." His fingers curled around the edge of the table, knuckles white. But over time, as pride grew, that promise was broken. The power twisted. The more an alpha in my line uses rage instead of mercy, fear instead of justice, the stronger the curse becomes. Lina frowned. What happens when it grows stronger? He met her gaze, and for a second she saw real fear there. Not of Darius, not of war, but of himself. "We lose ourselves," he said simply. "Not just for a night under the moon, permanently. The mind slips behind the beast. Some never return. They become exactly what the humans' worst stories describe, monsters." His mother's hands trembled in her lap. Lina quickly shifted her attention to her, translating for her in sign with gentle care. As she signed, "lose themselves," the Queen Mother's eyes glossed with unshed tears. "I've watched it," the older woman signed, face twisting with pain. "His father, my husband, a king turned stranger, lost behind yellow eyes he couldn't close." Lina's throat tightened. She relayed the signs softly for the Alpha King, though she suspected he already knew every word his mother was speaking. "I swore," he said, voice rough, "that I would not become him, that no child would ever have to hide from my footsteps. But I've used this power in war. I've crossed lines. Every time I do, the curse digs deeper, my control frays, and if I fall, the curse doesn't end. It just passes, stronger, to whoever wears the throne next." "Darius," Lina whispered. "Or worse," he said, "to children not yet born." Lina leaned back, letting the weight of it sink into her. This wasn't a story about a king too proud to change. This was a man standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing every step forward risked pulling others down with him. "So you came here," she said slowly, "to find a cure." "The healers of my world have tried," he replied. "The elders have chanted, the seers have warned, the warriors have bowed or challenged. Nothing changes. But there are stories old, half forgotten, about someone outside our world. A listener, a bridge, someone who sees more than words and hears more than sound. Someone who can redirect a curse by changing the heart at its center." Lina stared at him, unsure whether to laugh at the impossibility of it or shake from the strange, terrible familiarity of it. "A listener," she echoed. "Like a therapist, a healer, a translator." "Someone," he said slowly, "who can stand between silence and noise, between fear and understanding, between what we say and what we mean." His eyes dropped to her hands, to the lingering motion of her fingers as they rested on the table. "When you spoke to my mother, when you signed as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the stories made sense for the first time." Lina's chest tightened. "You think I might be that person?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know this. When you stepped forward, every instinct I have, the same instincts that have kept me alive through battle and betrayal, told me not to stop you." Lina looked down at her own hands, at the faint ink stain on her thumb from marking last week's schedule, at the tiny scar on her index finger from a broken glass. She had never thought of herself as powerful, just useful sometimes, invisible most days. "I'm just a waitress," she said weakly. "I take orders, I carry trays. I learned sign language because my brother needed someone to talk to him. That's all." "That," the king said firmly, "is not all." The certainty in his voice shook her more than any threat Darius had made. His mother reached out suddenly, taking Lina's hand in both of hers. The older woman's palms were warm and slightly calloused. Her eyes shone with an intensity that made Lina forget, for a moment, how small she felt. "You stepped forward when everyone else pulled back," she signed, gripping Lina's fingers. "That is something kings cannot be taught, but hearts like yours are born with it." Lina translated the words aloud, her voice catching halfway through. Saying them made them feel heavier, more real. The Queen Mother squeezed her hand again, then began signing something slower, more deliberate. "There is a reason we found this café," she signed. "We were not just wandering. We followed a trail's stories of a town where people treat the silent with patience, where the outcasts are not mocked. A place where a little boy signs to his big sister outside the bookstore window, laughing." Lina's blood ran cold. "My brother," she whispered, "you saw us." The older woman nodded, smiling softly. "Weeks ago, my son was preparing to meet a healer in the city. I saw you both in the street. You were translating a joke for him. You laughed so hard you almost dropped your books. I knew we had to find you." Lina leaned back in her chair, the world spinning. All this time she had thought this was some wild accident, a random brush with a life that didn't belong to her. But they had come here on purpose. They had come because of her. "I didn't want you involved," the Alpha King said quietly. "I hoped it could be done without you, but when my mother recognized you, there was no more denying it. You're already tied to this, Lina, whether I like it or not." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words settle into her bones. Tied to this. Tied to a king, a curse, and a war she did not understand. When she opened them again, the king was watching her carefully, as if afraid she would bolt. "You can still walk away," he said. "Forget us. Pretend this was just a strange day with difficult customers. I won't blame you. I've ruined enough lives by asking them to stand close to mine." "Can you really walk away?" Lina shot back before she could stop herself. "If there's even a small chance I could help you, help your people. Help children not become monsters in their own homes. Can you honestly say you just go back to your throne and wait for the curse to swallow you?" His lips parted slightly, a breath caught in his throat. He looked at her as if she'd just peeled back a layer he'd buried even from himself. "I don't know," he said, almost to his own hands. I don't know how to do anything but fight." "That's not true," Lina replied, her voice gaining strength. "You knew how to kneel beside your mother when she couldn't hear what people yelled at you at the gates. You knew how to come to a town quietly and sit in a café instead of storming in with soldiers. You knew how to stand between her and danger without roaring about it for everyone to see." Her words hit him harder than any insult Darius had thrown. "You do know other ways," she finished softly. "You just don't trust them yet." His mother watched them both, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, not of sorrow this time, but of something achingly close to hope. "In my world," Lina said, "when someone you love starts slipping away because of something inside them, an illness, anger, addiction, you don't cure it with one big battle. You show up. Again and again. You listen, you talk, you forgive, you try. And sometimes you ask for help from people you never expected to need." Her hands curled around her cooling teacup. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "You came all this way," she said, "so ask." His eyes met hers, dark and searching, and for the first time completely unguarded. "Lina," he said, her name strange and careful on his tongue, "will you help me hold on to whatever part of me is still human?" The question sliced through every layer of doubt inside her. It wasn't just about him. It was about every kid like her brother who had ever needed someone to stand in the doorway between them and the loud, impatient world. Her fear didn't vanish. It just stepped aside long enough for her to nod. "Yes," she said, "I will." The promise left her mouth before she could weigh its cost. But once said, it felt right, like a door closing against the wind. At that exact moment, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, startling her. She glanced down at the screen. A message from her mother. "Where are you? Your brother says he saw a scary man in armor near the cafe. Are you safe?" Lina's heart lurched. The king noticed the shift in her expression. "What is it?" he asked, tension instantly returning to his shoulders. "It's my family," she whispered. "They're close. They already know something's wrong." Outside, the sky darkened again, clouds rolling thick and heavy over the town. The brief calm was over. Whatever came next would not let them sit quietly at a cafe table. Lina looked at the Alpha King, at his mother, at the storm gathering above them, and realized that saying yes was only the beginning. "Then we don't have much time," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "Because if Darius meant what he said, he won't let this town remain just a town for long." The rain began to pound harder, as if the sky itself were counting down to something none of them were fully prepared to face. When two worlds collide. By evening, the cafe had emptied, one nervous customer at a time, until only a handful of regulars remained, unwilling to step back into the storm just yet. The manager flipped the sign on the door from open to closing soon, casting a last, uncertain look at Lina before retreating to the back room to count the cash register. He hadn't asked about the armored stranger anymore. Perhaps it was easier to pretend he was part of some promotion, a weird but harmless spectacle. Lina knew better. She stood by the counter, fingers hovering over the screen of her phone. Her mother had sent 3 more texts and a missed call. Her brother had messaged her too, a selfie of his wide eyes and signed hands. "Are you okay? Mom is worried." His fingers in the picture blurred with motion, half of a joke, half of real fear. She typed back with shaky thumbs. "I'm safe. I'll explain everything when I get home. Stay inside, lock the doors, I love you." Her reflection in the phone screen showed eyes that looked older than they had that morning. The Alpha King stood by the window, watching the water river down the glass, his silhouette carved by the dim lights overhead. His mother sat at a table nearby, sipping the last of her hot chocolate, her shoulders hunched in a quiet tiredness that came not from walking, but from worrying. "You should go home," the king said without turning around. "Before the roads flood, before my world pushes too far into yours." "Too late," Lina replied softly, slipping her phone back into her apron. Your world is already here, and I said I'd help. He looked at her, and there was something almost like frustration in his eyes, threaded with reluctant admiration. Courage and stubbornness often walk hand in hand, he murmured. In my court, they make dangerous allies. In my life, Lina said. They're the only reason my brother is in school and not hidden away somewhere people don't have to deal with him. His eyes narrowed, studying her carefully. People would hide him. Some tried, she said simply. Not with chains or cages, with excuses, with closed doors, with we don't have the resources for that and maybe a different school would be better. They said it kindly, but the result would have been the same, him left out. She met his gaze squarely. I learned to fight quietly, with paperwork, meetings, laws, with a smile that doesn't back down. You fight with claws, I fight with patience, but it's still a fight. A shadow of a smile touched the corner of his mouth, brief as a flicker. Then perhaps, he said, I chose a better ally than I deserved. The bell above the door chimed softly. Lina spun around, heart leaping to her throat, half expecting Darius to stride back in with a smirk and an army. Instead, her mother stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain despite her umbrella, hair sticking to her forehead, eyes wide and frantic. Beside her, her little brother clutched her coat, his gaze darting quickly across the room until it landed on Lina and then on the Alpha King. For a moment, time tensed. Two worlds that were never meant to touch stared at each other over the worn wooden floor and the smell of coffee grounds. Lina, her mother exclaimed, voice sharp with relief and anger. She hurried forward but stopped halfway as she took in the stranger's cloak, the gleam of armor, the wolf carved into his chest. Fear flashed across her face. What is going on? Who is this? Her brother didn't wait. He ran to Lina and threw his arms around her waist. She hugged him tight, her throat burning, then pulled back just enough to sign. I'm okay. You're okay. Everything is complicated, but we're okay. He looked up at the king again, curiosity now outweighing fear. Is he dangerous? He signed, his fingers small and quick. Lina hesitated and then shook her head slowly. He's trying not to be, she signed back. That's why he's here. The Alpha King watched the exchange, his gaze softening at the sight of the boy's earnest face and flying hands. He glanced at Lina's mother, then bent his head slightly, not quite a bow, but close for a man like him. I am not here to harm your family, he said quietly. Or your town. I came seeking help. I brought trouble with me instead. Her mother swallowed, torn between protective instinct and the impossible politeness of responding to a man who clearly came from a world beyond understanding. You're with him, she asked Lina, voice low. Is he threatening you? No, Lina said quickly. He's the one Darius was threatening. Darius, her mother repeated, confused. A relative, the king said, the word tasting bitter. One who prefers fear over hope. Lina's brother tugged at her sleeve, signing faster now. He looks like the warriors in my game, he said, but sadder. Lina translated softly, embarrassed, but when she glanced up, she saw the king wasn't offended. If anything, the boy's blunt honesty had cut through something stiff inside him. He knelt. The movement was slow and deliberate, his heavy armor bending with a soft grind until he was at eye level with the boy. The café went silent again, as if the very walls were afraid to interrupt. What is your name? The king asked. The boy looked at Lina. He's asking your name, she signed. Her brother straightened, fingers moving with confidence. My name is Sami. The king watched his hands, then looked to Lina for translation. This is Sami, she said, my little brother. The king nodded thoughtfully, then with surprising care raised his own hands. The movement was clumsy, hesitant, but unmistakable. He formed the letters slowly, Sami. Sami's eyes widened. He tried to sign my name, he signed, delighted, looking up at Lina with a grin. You did it right, Lina told the king, unable to keep the amazement from her voice. A faint hint of pride flickered across his face. My mother taught me letters, he said. She said if I wanted to be worthy of my crown, I had to be able to speak in more than one language, even the ones without sound. The Queen Mother smiled at him from the table, eyes shining. Lina's mother watched all of this, torn between disbelief and an awkward, growing respect. This was not the monster she'd feared in her texts. This was a man trying very hard not to be one. I don't understand any of this, her mother said finally, voice unsteady. But I know one thing, if he brought danger, we can't face it alone. Not with you and Sami in the middle of it. Lina shook her head. I don't think we're in the middle by accident, she replied. He came because of us, because of people like Sami, because of what we know how to do. What does that even mean? Her mother asked, eyes shining. We're not warriors, we're just us. The Alpha King rose slowly to his feet, his presence filling the room once more, but somehow less threatening now that Sami's name rested gently on his tongue. In my world, he said, there is no greater warrior than the one who stands between helplessness and hope. You have done that for your son. Lina does that for your town. He hesitated, then added, I do not know how to do that without teeth and steel. She has agreed to teach me. Lina's mother stared at her. You agreed to what? I agreed to help him stay human, Lina said simply. So he can help his people, so curses don't become excuses. The room fell quiet. From somewhere outside, a distant rumble shook the ground, too deep to be thunder. The cups on the shelves rattled faintly. Sami's eyes widened. That wasn't the sky, he signed quickly. That was something else. The Alpha King stiffened, his hand flying to the wolf emblem on his chest, as if listening through it. Darius, he said, voice low. He's testing the boundaries already. Lina's heart lurched. Here, in the town. Not yet, the king replied. But near. He'll start with fear, shadows, sounds, things that make people turn on each other before he ever sets foot inside their streets. If he breaks this town's trust, then my search for a cure will look like nothing more than selfish madness. Lina looked at her family, her mother's anxious face, Sami's bright, worried eyes. She looked at the king, at his mother, at the storm outside swallowing the last of the daylight. I can't let him do that, she whispered. I can't let someone like that decide what kind of story this town becomes. The king met her gaze. Then what will you do, listener? The title felt heavy and impossible, but she didn't push it away. I'll do what I always do, she said slowly, feeling something inside her click into place. I'll stand in the middle, between what people fear and what they don't understand yet, and I'll make sure your story doesn't become their excuse to hate anything different. Sami grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. I'll help, he signed stubbornly. I'm not afraid of loud people. Her mother exhaled shakily, torn between fear and pride. You get that from your sister, she muttered, then looked at the Alpha King. If you're staying near my children, we do this with rules. No secrets. No, I'll explain later. If danger is coming, we face it prepared, not blind. For the first time that day, Lina saw the king look, almost unsure. In his world, people didn't usually set rules for him. They obeyed or didn't survive. But now, in this small café, a woman with tired eyes and a shaking umbrella had drawn a line in the sand. Agreed, he said quietly. No secrets, not from you, not anymore. The lights flickered once more, brighter this time, as if responding. The rain outside slowed, replaced by a thick, heavy quiet. From the street came a sound that did not belong. A distant, eerie howl, too deep to be any dog, too clear to be the wind. Sami's fingers froze mid-sign. Lina felt the hairs on her arms rise. The Alpha King's eyes snapped to the door, his entire body going rigid. "He's closer than I thought," he said. The café, the family, the king, the Queen Mother, all of them stood on the fragile edge between the world they knew and the one that had come knocking. And in the center, hands trembling but heart steadying, stood Lina, the shy waitress who had stepped forward once and now had to decide just how far she was willing to go.